Tom?
You bet.
Felt like that was a warning shot, right?
I must be a Yankees fan.
Yeah, I didn't want to talk about the Mets, and we are live, Mr. Chair.
All right, baseball talk's over. I'm trying to get my agenda up, but I'm struggling a little bit. I think we'll give probably, looks like we kind of have a quorum based on just my review of the folks who are in attendance. So we're probably good to go, but we'll give another minute or two before we get started here.
Certainly.
I think that is a yes from Tom.
Hang on, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, Matt.
I missed that.
I was just wondering if we could get started. Hey, Sylvette, could you do me a quick, could you just screenshot the agenda and text it to me? My Novus is not functioning. I'm not sure why.
Read this.
You got this, Tom?
I got it.
Anybody that can do that would be great. But I think we can get started in
Yes.
the interim with welcoming everybody to our, I guess this is our first board meeting of 2021.
It is.
So welcome to everyone and Happy New Year. Glad that you're all joining us. We will get started with the Pledge of Allegiance, correct?
Yeah, that is correct, Mr. Chair. We'll work with the pledge, and we'll have Sylvette mute the callers on the phone as we do the pledge here.
Awesome.
Okay?
All right, everybody in your own time.
All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
thank you, everybody. Appreciate that. I want to, we've got a few changes now. So after roll call, I will welcome a new member of the Board of Governors. And then we've got, we're going to bid adieu to a couple members of the Board of Governors. So, Sylvette, would you please do a roll call vote for us, or roll call for us?
Certainly. I just want to please remind everyone to unmute yourselves. All right. Ronnie Dames.
Here.
Mike Dowd.
Is there?
Yeah, I know you. Frank Facciano.
Here?
Glenn Geisinger.
Present.
John Hayes.
Here.
Ron Heckman. Larry Hemberger. James Irwin.
Here.
Jeff Matskin. He's also on the call.
Okay.
Glenn Reedman. He's also on the call.
Glenn, I saw.
Mike Stershik.
Here.
Matt Turk.
Here.
Chris Worley.
Here.
And Tara Zirinsky. She was also on the call.
She was also on.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I see her.
Yep.
Here. Oh, I'm here. Sorry. Didn't realize both of them.
Matskin's here too.
Excellent.
All right. Very good. We have a quorum, sir.
Awesome. Wonderful. So before we get started, I wanted to take a minute and just welcome James. I believe you go by Jim or Irwin to the Board of Governors. Jim was appointed by Northampton County in I think it was at their December meeting or maybe their November meeting. So he is our newest member of the Board of Governors. Jim, do you want to take a minute to just introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure. Yeah, my name's Jim Irwin. I'm president of Lehigh Valley Labor Council. I'm also a staff representative with AFSCME, District Council 88 out of Plymouth Meeting. We represent workers pretty much from Philadelphia to Northampton County. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. And apologies for my dogs chiming in on that one. So we have those dogs. We have two outgoing board members that I wanted to take a minute and recognize in our we normally do a plaque for something like this, but because we're not all together, we're not able to do something like that. But and we do not have both of them with us, but I wanted to first take an opportunity to recognize Chuck Diacont for his years of service on the Airport Authority. Chuck was also our chair. Chuck served from 2016 to 2020, so I guess I want to do a virtual presentation to Chuck of our appreciation, and I think we'll have a plaque sent over. Is that correct, Sylvette?
That is correct.
Great. And normally we'd ask for a word from Chuck, but Chuck, being the reserve gentleman that he is going to cede his time to the next recognition, which is, I also wanted to recognize Ted Rosenberger for his years of service on the Board of Governors. Ted served from 2016 to 2020, was a huge resource to me and a guide to me in my time on the board thus far, and I've really appreciated having an opportunity to serve with Ted. So thank you, Ted, and I present you with the plaque, the virtual plaque, and we'll get the real one over in a minute, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to say a couple words if you like.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Super.
Okay, great. Well, it's been a great experience, and I, as you know, I'm not going to be a stranger to the airports. My little charter operation is quickly becoming a thriving business over at Queen City, and so I'm very thankful for all the relationships with staff and other board members that I made over the last 5 years. I actually asked not to be reappointed because I'm just so busy between family life and my growing little charter business. So it's been a pleasure. I'm sure this isn't the last you'll see of me, but I'm very thankful for the experience. And I can't say enough good things about both the board and the staff and how the airport is run. I sort of got on the board at the encouragement of some people that thought, general aviation, for example, wasn't being taken seriously enough and everything. And, I have to say, overall, I'm really pleased with, the amount of time and energy that goes into our general aviation community, in addition to the, obviously critical airline and cargo service. So thank you. And this isn't a goodbye. This is just a new chapter.
Thank you, Ted. And I want to really quickly, he didn't mention it, but Ted was instrumental in adjusting the language in our bylaws to get more kind of up to date, and really pushed us to adopt better non-discrimination language in our bylaws and to have more inclusive language in our bylaws. And I've always appreciated that about you, Ted, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the board carrying that banner in your absence, and I'll certainly keep it in mind as we continue to plow ahead and be a more diverse and open organization here within the Lehigh Valley. So thank you for that so much.
Thanks, Ted.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next item on our agenda. I do not believe we have any public comment for today.
No, sir, we do
Okay.
not.
Nothing. Okay. Great. We will move on then to the approval of the minutes. We have two sets of minutes because we didn't have a regular December board meeting. We had our special meeting in December, which was very focused, and I'm sure you took a minute to review the minutes and see the need for that meeting. But I'll ask for an approval of the minutes of November 24th, 2020, and for the minutes of December 21, 2020.
So moved.
I have a motion to approve, please.
So moved.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor of approving the 2 minutes as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. I'll take a minute now to remind everyone that a lot of the action at the Airport Authority happens during committees, which are always the Thursday in advance of our board meetings. So we had a good day of committee meetings this past Thursday. So from that, you'll have an opportunity to see some of the actions that came out of that. We'd start with the treasurer's report. John, I think you'll probably be deferring to Todd on this one.
You are correct, Mr. Chair. Todd, if you could take it from here, please.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to kind of run through what we went through in the Finance Committee. For those of you that were at the meeting, it's just kind of a education of all the stuff we went over. But first, as I did on last week, I just want to acknowledge everybody for the hard work and just teamwork that was necessary for us to get through a really tough 2020. As you can see, as we start off here, our passenger traffic was down 62% in December 20 versus December 2019. Overall, for the year, we were down 57%. Again, our revenues are based on activity. So when activity is down, obviously that impacts the financial concerns of the airport. This is the month of December. You can see that we were favorable versus budget, 304,000, and we were favorable versus projection. A lot of that number is based on reversals of some conservative estimates that we had in there from earlier in the year. It did not really come to fruition. For example, we had a ton of bad debt set aside that was obviously more than we needed. Some other things that, again, you'll see that we've done our best to kind of get as many grants as we can, do all those things, and we did actually get a FEMA grant for $57,000 that was not in our earlier projections. So again, the work of the staff, we continue to manage our expenses, doing everything they can to kind of chase that lower revenue. Again, you can see where we are year to date. We ended up in the black. We were in the black since August, and we maintained that. Obviously, we ended up about 1.3 million of net income. Keep in mind that we had 3.8 million of CARES money, and not counting the 500,000 that we got from the counties, which actually shows up more on the depreciation line than a direct subsidy. This is just kind of running through the revenue drop and some of the things that you can just kind of see some of those variances. Obviously, we did not have the CARES money in our original budget, but you can see pretty much every line is down since last year. This is kind of summing them up. Again, we're chasing, I think early in the year I said we would be down about $12 million in revenue. We were down 11.7, and we've been chasing that number. But again, all things considered, CARES money, hard work, everybody managing expenses to become only 362,000 versus budget is, something that kind of all pat ourselves on the back for. Again, this is our top cost center for December, and that's actually year to date, and you can just see what that is for December. So you can, I always talk about parking being such a critical number for us. But we had 923,000 of net income from the parking department, and our overall income was 1.3. So you can see that's a big percentage. Again, this is comparing 2020 top cost centers versus 2019. Again, you can see that top line that really shows really the impact of the parking, which is really something we use to kind of help us throughout the airport. It is really our number one revenue source. So that being impacted really hurts us significantly. So you can see in 2019 we had 3.8 million of net income, and in 2020 we had 900,000 of income. Again, I wanted to throw this out just for comparisons because I really think it's important to kind of put 2020 in historical perspective. This is all of our income from operations since 2000, just on an apples to apples basis, without adjusting for any kind of cash flow. You can see that 2020 on an operational basis at the top there was, there's 22 periods there. 2020 was the worst. 2021 is actually based on budget. But then you go over to the net income side, you can see that that's a negative 2.8 million. Obviously, all these numbers are without CARES. And then we're projecting a negative 2.5 million in 2021, again, without CARES. You go down to the very bottom, you can kind of see that the net income becomes positive with the CARES money, but again, it's still, even with the CARES money, they were the worst years that we've had since the turn of the century. This is just, obviously the original numbers I just gave you did not account for inflation. So in 2000, that was $1, and in 2021, it's $1.51, just kind of apples to apples. And then you kind of do the inflation adjusted numbers just to kind of put it, you know, where you adjust for the time value of money. And you can kind of see there that no matter which way you do it, 2020 and 2021 are the worst years. You can see here when you adjust for the time value of money that 2004 was actually our best year. Again, this is our cash flow. You know, just kind of running through these things. Again, anticipation of grants. We do have money in there for some to work on the connector project that is factored in there. We do not have any proceeds at this point built into those numbers. Now, if I go back to, I'm going to go back here for a second. I want to point out on line 8 and 9 that our debt service returns to full amount starting in January. We did do the reissue in 2020, and that number is going to has significantly increased starting in January. Again, you can see some of the things we're anticipating. We're anticipating the Rockefeller sale of $9 million showing up in March at this point. And obviously, we're planning on using that. A lot of those proceeds are going to be used for our capital, mainly on our terminal, and some of those things we want to the FAA to kind of help us out with that terminal connector. But again, that $9 million is money that we're going to use for capital. You can see at the very bottom here that we're expected to stay above our 60 days cash on hand, including some anticipated future debt service, approximately $722,000 per month. But again, you can see we're starting out at 184 in January, and it's sliding down to 147 in June. Also in here, and I did not mention, is CARES funding. We have about $3.5 million built into our budget for 2021, and we do not expect to get any of those proceeds until April. April will be the first time we start drawing some of those funds down. And at this point, I'll open it up for any questions. And the other thing I did want to mention, before I do that, is I did not mention in our finance committee meeting that our pension was up over 13% for both plans. There's one less thing we got to worry about. Our assumed rate of return is 7.5. So the fact that was at 13 is one less thing we have to worry about. So I did want to point that out as well. But again, I'll open it up to questions.
I don't have any questions, just a comment. I want to thank Todd again for all the work, Todd, Tom, the entire team for all the work too. keep the results where they are. It's been a fantastic team effort. So thank you guys and ladies.
Okay. If there are any questions for Todd, please chime in. Otherwise, I'd ask for a motion to accept the December 2020 Treasurer reports as presented.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Okay. All in favor of accepting the report as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the report is accepted. Before we move on real quick to the Finance Committee, I just want to ask, if you are not speaking, please do remember to mute yourself to reduce background noise. And that goes for me too. With that, I'll hand off to Glenn. If you could please present the Finance Committee action items.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Committee met on Thursday morning, covered a couple of items. The only one that needs to come before the board today is the airline rate and charges. We did go into an in-depth discussion of this, and the committee recommended to the board unanimously to move this forward as presented. I'll let Darren get into any of the details really very quickly for the board's review.
Thanks, Glenn. Appreciate it. So after the meeting, a request was made to just maybe take a couple of minutes and talk a little bit more about what rates and charges are. You know, sometimes I think as airport professionals, we throw these things around and don't go into enough, explanation for those of you who maybe don't spend all your days at an airport. So just a couple slides here, and certainly stop and ask questions if you want. We won't spend a lot of time, but just want to review this a bit. So this first one is basically what the FAA says rates and charges are. So basically, we need to establish aeronautical rates and charges that make us self-sufficient. You've definitely heard us talk about being self-sustaining or self-sufficient in the past, and this is right down on that, along those same lines. And then, that being said, rates charged to users are generally set to ensure that the revenues cover the airport's cost of providing the service and used exclusively for airport operations. So we're not really, this isn't income, it's cost recovery at the end of the day. We're not gaining money from this, it's recover costs. So that's important to remember as we go through this. So what are the charges? They're basically the airlines are paying for the use of the airport. And we, talk about three cost centers, so to speak here. The airfield cost center, which we hear us talk about landing fees all the time. That's basically to pay for our runways and our taxiways. And those fees are assessed based on maximum gross landing weight of the aircraft. The apron cost center, again, it's the parking areas, it's pavement maintenance in those areas. And again, assessed based on maximum gross weight. Important to note, those are not changing. We've always done those based on gross weight. The new methodology we're talking about is for the terminal. That's really what we're changing in this new resolution. So, and the terminal includes things, ticket counters, gates, jet bridges, hold rooms, bag rooms, our IT infrastructure, which is a little bit unique for us because as a common use facility, we provide all those computers and everything for the airlines to use. So we do bill them back for it though. And those fees are going to be assessed based on the new methodology that we're going to talk about here. And those costs are basically your general operating maintenance expenses, infrastructure expenses, and then allocations that we put out there. So there's two basic ways that rates and charges are documented for the airlines. It's through a use and lease agreement or rates by resolution or ordinance. In a use and lease agreement, that basically takes mutual agreement of all the parties. You really give up a lot of control to the airlines over your capital projects and things. So, the next time when we want to build hangar 12, we would have to go to the airlines and get approval for that. And that sometimes can be a tough sell. But the good piece is that the airlines cover all of your operating losses. And I did put in there sometimes, and you'll see why as we get into the methodology a little bit more. But on the resolution side, which is how we do it, there is DOT policy that tells us how we have to do it. Again, you see that we need to be self-sustaining. This is an interesting one too. They need to be reasonable and not unjustly discriminatory. So we can discriminate, we just can't do it unjustly. So, and thank you FAA for making that clear for us. But it is true, and what that really means is you don't have to have the same rates necessarily for every type of carrier, but so it can be somewhat discriminatory. They just have to all be fair. And at the end of the day, with this one, with rates by resolution, you cannot require airlines to cover costs of any non-aeronautical facilities. So a little different than if you have a use and lease agreement where they can cover losses on the total facility. So 3 basic types of methodology. Residual methodology, and that is where the airlines cover pretty much all your costs, but they also share in all the rewards. So, you really don't build up a lot of equity in the airport, and that's where you are going to them for approval on capital projects. So again, if you want to do things that don't necessarily benefit the airlines, sometimes that's a little bit tougher to justify. Then a compensatory methodology, where you're only recovering those costs that are allocated to the occupied facility, similar to how we're doing it. Airport assumes more financial risk, if not all of it, and the airlines then only pay for what they use. So really, they're not covering your losses and things. They're basically almost paying like more of a standard kind of lease type of payment. But the airport does get to keep all the non-airline revenue here. There's no revenue sharing required. And then there's the hybrid methodology, which honestly is what most places end up with, and that's what we're using as a hybrid methodology. So a little less risk for us, a little more control for us than if we went to residual. We are able to carve out some of those cost centers, so we don't have to necessarily share parking revenues and things. And then there's a revenue sharing formula, so we get to decide basically how much revenue we share back with the airlines. And important again to note, residual methodology cannot be imposed by ordinance or resolution. That has to be by agreement. So why are we changing our methodology? Basically, again, we need to ensure the fair and reasonable allocation of airline costs. We want a single methodology for all carriers. We did not have that in the past. We had 2 different methodologies available. Anybody carrier could pick either one, but there were 2 separate methodologies. And again, that we don't want to be unjustly discriminatory. We want to promote efficient use of our gates. That doesn't sound like a big deal, but we're going to see it in the not too distant future where at certain times of the day our gates are going to become pretty occupied. We may not have any empty gates on those overnight hours, those early morning departures. So we want to make sure that we're promoting efficient use and giving at least some sort of reward for carriers that are using larger aircraft. We want to maintain competitive rates for not only our existing carriers, but new carriers. If our rates and charges aren't structured in the proper way, it definitely can be a barrier to entry for new carriers, and we don't want that. If we are able to attract a new low-cost carrier, they're probably going to come in here and start similar to how Allegiant did on a very small basis, with only a couple flights a week. So we want to make sure that these rates don't penalize that. And then again, we're a common use facility. We want to make sure we treat this terminal as a true common use facility. So there's no exclusive use for anybody in this. And you'll see there, the big thing is we want to make sure if the airlines feel that we are being unjustly discriminatory, they can file a complaint with the FAA. And it has happened to other airports and things, and we want to make sure that we're not on the wrong end of one of those complaints. So again, I talked about the fact this is not income, it's really cost recovery. So you'll see as we show you the numbers for the new rates here. On the current methodology, the pie, notice the pie is the same size on either one. All we're doing is we're collecting the same amount of money with the old methodology and the new methodology. We're just reallocating it to how it's being paid. So you'll see there, in the new methodology, Allegiant's costs go up a little bit. Americans stay relatively flat. Deltas go down a tiny bit, and United's go down a little bit. So how do we go through this process? Important to note, this started back in 2019. We started talking to the airlines about this. Both individual sort of one-on-one conversations with each of the carriers, and then, or what we call our Airport and Airline Affairs Committee meetings, so, group meetings with the airlines. We had conversations with all 4 airlines to talk about the fact that mostly it kind of went down 2 tracks. With the legacy carriers, it was a lot about, we understand you've got some concerns with this, so we are taking a look at it. And with Allegiant, it was more of, we understand you're evolving as a carrier, so your rates are going to have to look a little different than they have in the past. You're starting to act more like a legacy carrier, so we need to figure that out. I think Todd put it very well the other day when he talked about the fact, when Allegiant came here, they were getting the child rate. They were the new carrier, they were small, but as you grow up, you used to be able to go to the movies for $10, and as you become an adult, it costs you $15, even if you don't want to pay that. So that's kind of where Allegiant is now, and I think it was good that we had these conversations, especially with Allegiant prior to them opening their base here. We wanted to make sure that this didn't look like some sort of, kind of bait and switch, like you open a base and now we're going to raise your rates. That was very important to us to make sure that they knew that we were looking at this and that it was a good possibility that rates would go up. So we started formal negotiations in 2020. I think it was January 2020. We actually had an in-person meeting. You guys all remember when we used to do in-person meetings? We actually all sat around the table. We had lunch. We, all kinds of crazy stuff. No masks. It's hard to remember those days, but it was only 12 months ago, believe it or not. So thought then we were going to kick this thing off. We were going to, negotiate this through the spring and summer and be ready to have this thing approved before our budget time. Well, and then of course, as everything else, COVID hit and kind of brought everything to a bit of a halt for a while there. We did have a couple of meetings with the airlines throughout that time during COVID, but it was honestly more addressing COVID-related issues than it really was talking about rates and charges. So picked those meetings back up with the airlines on the rates and charges that are in the August timeframe, and then had several meetings between August and today to discuss these. Worked with our consultants at Unison Consulting and our aviation council at Kaplan Kirsch and Rockwell, and we went through at least 20 different rate scenarios. Anything from 100% employments to 100% operations and everything in between. We did some with some fixed components in there. I mean, we vetted this and went through everything, considered what our goals were as an authority and what the airline's goals were, just trying to find where that sweet spot was for everybody. Ultimately, we decided on a combination of 60% employments and 40% operations. That's a compromise. The legacy carriers would prefer to not have any operational component in their equation. And honestly, the low-cost carriers would probably prefer to have no employment component and do everything on operations. So we came to something that was fair. We came to something that's not unjustly discriminatory. So we wanted to make sure that that was there. And I think it was, a good negotiation. I've always heard is when everybody walks away a little bit unhappy. And I think in this case, everybody, including the authority, walked away from the table not getting everything we wanted. But I think we all got a little closer to what we wanted. Finally, we distributed the actual draft of the resolution. That's sort of all the legalese stuff that makes the attorneys happy. We solicited comments, received some comments, addressed them. Some we did make changes, some we explained why we couldn't make those changes. So what's actually changing, and this is what we're actually going to ask you to approve in the resolution. So on the legal side, again, it's a lot of the standard stuff that brings it back up in line with a lot of other agreements as far as indemnification, insurance requirements. Definitely beefed up the environmental insurance and indemnification. That has our grant assurance language that's in pretty much all of our agreements, the subordination language. And then we did make sure it has that LNAA standard non-discrimination language. We'll call that the TED clause, since he was the one who helped push that through for us. And then also all those required federal clauses in there as well. And then on the financial side, this is where the change to the cost per unpaid passenger comes out. So as you saw back in the graph, Allegiant's cost went up about 15.6%. And then the other three carriers went down anywhere from 2 to 8% per carrier there. So again, 15.6% is a large increase. Allegiant understands it. I won't say they're happy about it, but they understand it and they're okay with it at this point. They understand why it had to happen. So that's it. I'm happy to answer questions. Or, Todd also can jump in if you've got financial questions.
Thank you, Darren, and really thank you. I think it took more time than we'd normally dedicate in our big board meeting, but this is an important issue that I think it's worth all of our governors understanding and for the public to understand the background behind rates and charges. So thank you for that thorough presentation. Does anyone have any questions for Darren on rates and charges? Sounds like no. Glenn, are there any other, this is the single action item where we approved the rates and charges increase at our committee meeting. So we're now looking for the full board to approve the airline rates and charges as presented. Which
That's
is
correct.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reedman. That is correct. We need to approve the rates and charges for a full board vote, Mr. Chairman. I have a motion from Mr. Reedman. Do I have a
Second, Tara.
I have a second from Ms. Zirinsky. All in favor, please say aye.
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 And if I have any opposed? All right, hearing none, the motion moves unanimously forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll now turn it over.
Thank you. Mike, do you want to, we have one action item from our business committee meeting. If you could handle that, please. Oh, and before we jump onto that, excuse me, real quick, we do have one phone caller. I think the number is 610-657-1516. Could you please unmute yourself and identify yourself for the purposes of recording the meeting? I think *6 to unmute on the phone.
Hello?
Hello.
It's Ron.
Hey, Ron, how you doing? Glad you can join us.
Hi. Oh, yeah, I've been here. I guess I just forgot to hit *6.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Mr. Dowd, would you please present the item for the business committee? Did we lose Mike?
Not sure if we did. I know what we would like to do, we do have Cedric Johnson here from ADCI, Mr. Chair, and ultimately we'll move into an exec session to discuss the item in the executive committee. But I think, Brian, if you have the availability, if Mr. Dowd's not available, I guess we can run into the grant acceptance discussion.
Sure. Yep.
For whatever reason, we can't hear you, Mike. Sorry. Brian, do you want to present it?
Before we do that, Mr. Chairman, I think it's appropriate to have an executive session to discuss the status of the pending litigation matter that relates to what's going to be presented to the board in public session. So
Prior to the RACP grant?
I thought we were moving on to the terminal connector award bids. If this is the
No, we have one item before
matter,
that.
then I'll withdraw what I just said.
Okay. Ryan, do you want to quickly describe our RACP?
Sure. Yep. Yeah, good
Somehow
afternoon.
I got cut out, so I
There we go. There's
apologize.
Mike.
Back. All right, well, Ryan, why don't you bring us up to speed?
Great. All right. Thanks, Mike. So this item, we're just looking for acceptance on the redevelopment assistance capital program grant that was submitted by the Airport Authority. We submitted our application August 11th. We received, of 2020, we received official notice this year, January 8th, in the amount of $1 million for our terminal connector project. It's a 50-50 grant match, so we're required to match it with $500,000. And we have to accept it by February 8th of 2021. Once it is accepted, we go through more of a formal process working with the state. Again, as part of RACP, you can get additional funding in additional years. So in 2021, we're going to look to get some additional funding for 2022. But with that, we're just looking for acceptance of the redevelopment assistance capital program grant funds in the amount of $1 million awarded for the terminal connector security checkpoint project, and authorize Tom Stout, our executive director, to execute said agreements on the LNA's behalf. Any questions?
So moved.
We have a second to that?
I'll second.
And all those in favor, please answer by saying aye.
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 All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We can move on to,
Thank you. And that brings us to the last item, which is our executive committee item. Per the judge's request, we are going to hold that item for after our executive session because it does contain a matter that we need to discuss in executive session. With that, I would then ask Tom, could you please present this list or your director's report?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. First thing, we will be distributing the complete list of accomplishments as we do every year. But just wanted to give you a sneak preview of 2020 milestone accomplishments, including opening up the Allegiant base that we talked about earlier. 3 new nonstop routes that were added last year. Also, highest air cargo volume on record at 210 million pounds. We recall the ribbon cutting for Hangar 11. We had obviously COVID and worked through the process of our Fly Safe with ABE program, which, by the way, won the Airports Council International Overall Marketing Program Award last year. We have the Michaela A. Ashmore Military Resource Center that was brought online. We did host the president twice, and we also, which is last but not least, completed our 2019 financial and single audit, not only ahead of schedule, but with no audit findings. So just some of the highlights wanted to mention for the board today. As was mentioned earlier, December passenger traffic down. Todd says 62%, I say 61.7, but who's counting? We did mention air cargo volume was up 15% for the year, again, highest on record. Current January passenger traffic for the month right now, month to date, is trending about 60% below last January's levels. And nationally, TSA is seeing about a 61% reduction in January month to date so far, so about on par. Since our last meeting on December 21st, going back to January 6th, the FAA completed their flight check of the Runway 6 ILS and Precision Approach Path Indicator for ABE. The equipment has been returned to service. The Runway 6 Category 2 Instrument Landing System was out of service since the summer due to the runway construction project, so we're excited to have that back for the winter, particularly on days like today. On Thursday, January 14th, we brought back music to the airport, sort of virtually, and that's via our PA system. So we're still featuring our local talents and performers, but just being able to pipe their performances through our PA system. So happy to have that back in some form. On Wednesday, January 20th, the LNAA Police Department presented a check for $1,400 to For Pete's Sake Cancer Foundation in memory of Michaela Ashmar. On Friday the 22nd, we did our peeps for passengers in a socially distanced way. We had a self-service table set up, lots of peeps in the departure terminal. I don't think there were any leftovers, as I recall. And let's see, on Monday, we did have staff presenting to the New Jersey American Society of Travel Advisors, about 40 different folks showcasing ABE and talking to our neighboring state travel advisors about everything that ABE has to offer. And then in terms of what's coming, January 27th, tomorrow, we will begin with rapid PCR testing at the airport. So currently, 15minuteresult.com provides antigen and antibody testing here on site. They're doing about an average of about 100 tests a day, and the PCR testing won't provide results in 15 minutes. It's a little bit longer, not days, but 24 hours. So we're excited to have that available online. That should be up and running tomorrow. On Friday, we are hosting a luncheon, in a sense, for 20 recipients of our Props Award, which is our positive rewards for outstanding performance at ABE, a number of different stakeholders, tenants, and others who received accolades from customers and others here. So we're excited that's not offered by management, but really awarded by peers. On Thursday, February 11th, American Airlines Chicago service will be resuming. Beginning in March, Delta's second Atlanta flight will also resume. We're still waiting on a date for that. And on March 4th, United's Chicago service will also begin. So that really concludes my report, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions for Tom?
Tom, this is Larry Himberger. Can you hear me?
I can.
I just wanted to hitchhike on John for a second there. The work that you and your staff have done in these trying times is second to none. It's just been unbelievable what you've been able to accomplish with what you had to work with. And while it's improving, it's a long way from back to normal. But I just want to thank you and your entire team. And that's right down to the guys that are throwing the bags. Thank you. They're for doing a great job.
Absolutely. And thank you, Larry, and certainly would echo that. It's such a team effort and really appreciate the hard work by everyone to get us where we are.
Thank you, Tom. And it really, you know, I'd echo what Larry had to say, and I'm thinking back to when we opened that Allegiant base in February, and man, if we had just, you know, kept the year to 2 months, it would have been like the best year ever.
Yeah.
And looking at, I see we hosted the former president a couple times. Our hosting of that, I'll try to not keep it or stay away from being political, but I can think of some other candidates that we may want to host if our hosting has any impact on the outcome of elections. I got a few people in mind. I think our next item is the solicitor's report. Judge, do you have anything to report here?
Yes, on just one item, it's time again to be thinking about the Commonwealth's requirement that board members last year, anybody who was on the board last year, has to file a financial interest disclosure form. I'm going to be reminding you throughout the next couple of months about this. The deadline, the absolute deadline for it is May 1, but it doesn't hurt to get thinking about it. And as your income tax is being prepared, you probably have the information you need to just move right into these financial disclosure forms. If there are any questions that you have about how the form should be filled out, I'm available. You can contact me, and that's part of my function. I'll give you the advice that you're asking for, and with regard to the financial disclosure form. I think copies of this form are available from Sylvette, and I'm sure they're also on the internet in an appropriate place. But just a first reminder, you'll be hearing me repeat this over the next couple of months. And May 1 is the absolute deadline for filing.
And I believe I believe you can complete it online. I think that's what I did
Correct.
last year, and it was fairly straightforward and fairly simple. I'd love to see it.
That's correct. I think there is an online.
Yeah, it'd be great if we could get these done by April 1, but that might be an ambitious goal. That's really not that complicated, though. So thank you, Judge.
I did not see the online version. Sylvette, if you could send that around to everyone, a link to that, that'd be great.
Will do.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
So
John.
that it's also important to remind the board members who have left, Chuck Diacont and Ted Rosenberger, that they are obligated to file the form because it relates to last year.
Will do, sir. Also, if you are planning on doing your forms online, please send me a copy of that for our records as well, please.
Great. Thank you, Judge. Do we have any new business for the board? Okay. Judge, I think if you could please describe the need for an executive session.
There's a need for an executive session to discuss a pending litigation matter relating to a bid protest. And I think that discussion ought to be held prior to returning to the agenda item with regard to award of bids for the terminal connector. So I would ask that we go into executive session for that purpose. I'm not aware whether there are any other requests for an executive session. Mr. Stout, is there anything else?
I don't believe so. Mr. Solicitor, I think that really should encompass everything.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. I'd entertain a motion to enter into executive session.
So moved.
And a second, please.
Second.
Pending litigation, and that's exclusively what was discussed during the executive session. There was no voting, no decisions were made. That will be done in public session, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we will now return to the items that were to be presented as part of the executive committee. During our executive committee meetings on Thursday, we reviewed and awarded or recommended the award of bids for our terminal connector project. I think Ryan or Cedric, do you want to walk us through that award for purposes of the full board?
Sure, Matt, so I'll have Cedric run through the PowerPoint, and then I'll read through the actual wording of the recommendation, if that works.
Thank you, sir.
Great.
Okay, Cedric?
Okay, thanks. Okay, thanks. Good afternoon. Happy New Year to all. Good to see you all again. Just briefly on the project itself as an overview, you can see the area highlighted in blue. The project focuses on separating the departing and arriving passenger flow. You know, the existing tunnel right now causes the departing and arriving cross flow. The checkpoint is currently 2 lanes. This project proposes to expand the checkpoint to 4 lanes to not only meet the current demand, but the projected demand over the next 20 years. It includes 2 escalators, 2 elevators to get up to Wiley Concourse, and 2 elevators and 2 escalators and stairs to get down to the tunnel, which gives the redundancy that we currently do not have at the airport. Summary highlights on the bids. This was a multi-prime bid selection that we received November 2nd. As planned, we were able to get essentially a 15.3% reduction versus the engineer's estimate when you summarize all of those bids. So the total project cost was reduced from $35 million as programmed before to $29 million that I'll summarize here today. We got 4 in green. You see the 4 bids from the general contractors, where the yellow highlights the base bid from Bracy. The blue at the bottom combines the base bid with the alternates as the low bidder. We got 2 electrical contractors where WindGap was the low bidder, the blue there at the bottom column. And then we had 1 mechanical and 1 plumbing contractor, so they were both the apparent low bidders. The total with all the alternates selected and included was $24,501,684 versus $28,825,801. Again, nearly a $4.4 million reduction versus the engineer's estimate. The program cost itself included the soft costs, which is both the program and construction management component to deliver and execute the project at $1.4 million, the inspections needed to meet all of the code and criteria requirements at $1.4 million, and the construction administration component, which is the design clarifications, $1.3. Total program soft costs of $4.1 million. The org chart shows a combination of very diverse project team led by yours truly and Aurora. And the program itself is included in the current capital budget and cash flow. So when we add them all up, as I mentioned, with the base bid and alternates, we're $24,501,684. Soft cost at $4.1 million. Overall cost is $28,601,684. We include the state-of-the-art air purification system supplied by Life Air, which is the airport provided. And then also the other authority equipment is approximately $398,316, rounding that grand total with all equipment in at $29 million. It's important to mention within the $29 million, there's a combination of contingency and allowances of roughly 8.1% or $2,355,000. The current approved budget, capital budget for the airport is at $12,313,873. From the funding standpoint, the latest generation TSA equipment, they've committed to providing that for 4 lanes, which is approximately $1.5 million. That's not included in the $29 million number. We've been awarded and accepted an ACE grant, Alternative Clean Energy Grant, for $820,000, a combination of state grant funding at 2 and 1.5 for a combination of $3.5 million. Ryan alluded to the RACT state grant of $1 million, and then also the FAA eligible AIP reimbursable is confirmed at 5 for a total of $11.82 million in awarded grants. And there's pending grant applications for multimodal at approximated about $3 million. So the summary, the general contractor as the apparent low bidder would be Bracy Construction of Allentown at $20,217,300. The plumbing contractor is Guy Cooper of Willow Grove, Pennsylvania at $842,000. The mechanical contractor is Master Mechanical of McAdoo, Pennsylvania, $1,329,056. And the electrical contractor, WindGap of WindGap, Pennsylvania, conveniently $2,113,328. Grand total of $24,501,684, and a grand total programmatically with the furnished equipment of $29 million. The question may come, why time is of the essence and why to move now? As we mentioned before, we had a strategy to bid this project and be shovel ready. As a result, there was a $4.4 million bid combination that was lower than the estimate. We've had several calls and written commitment from TSA for 4 lanes of the latest generation screening equipment. I mentioned the $6.8 million that's already been secured in grants. And then even with the advent of COVID, the social distancing requirements still put a lot of demand on the 2-lane checkpoint that exists today and causes delays. So again, we even have to address it with the lower numbers that we've had this past year. We're optimistic and confident that with the vaccine availability and distribution already underway, some saying up to 1.5 million a day, then we'd be, in 2021, most of the population would be able to be vaccinated. And then again, this project is a 2-year deliverable. If we started today, it's still 24 months of construction to deliver that checkpoint. I think we're all optimistic that traffic levels will be back at least to 2017, but more probably 2019, 2020 by that time. And that's where the 3 lanes were needed, and then ultimately the 4 lanes as we move into the future.
And then, Matt, we'll go to Elvis. I'll just run through and bear with me because it is very wordy, but just to make sure we include all the information. Let's go to the bottom. So, thank you, Cedric. So we got the update. Keep going. Sorry, to the recommendation. So, again, we're looking to award the bids for the Terminal Connector Security Checkpoint Project really to the following. So, general contract to Bracy Construction Incorporated in the amount of $20,217,300. Plumbing contract to Guy M. Cooper Incorporated in the amount of $842,000. Mechanical contract to Master Mechanical Corporation in the amount of $1,329,000. Electrical contract to Wind Gap Electric Incorporated in the amount of $2,113,328. In addition, authorizing staff to purchase the associated equipment in the amount not to exceed $398,316. And again, as mentioned, total program cost to complete the 2-year projects approximately $29 million, with $12,313,873 already programmed in the approved 21 capital budget. In addition, acceptance of these bids and awards thereon by this resolution are subject to the preparation and execution of written contracts. No contractual rights arise until written contracts have been formally entered into by all parties.
Mr. Chairman, may I comment on the one last thing that was said there?
Please do.
With regard to the acceptance of the bids, thereon by resolution is subject to the preparation of the written contracts. And contractual rights don't arise until after the written contracts have been formally signed. That is a result of some thought that I had given to it earlier on, but subsequently I looked at the solicitation, the bidding solicitation, and found that that is not what the bidding solicitation says. So that last part has to be deleted. The contract becomes an actual contract with the acceptance of the bids today. Okay?
Understood.
All right.
All understood? All right. Would anybody like to ask any questions of Ryan prior to any motion being made? Okay. I'd ask for a motion then to accept the, or to award the bid as presented by Ryan to the various different subs or various different contractors.
So moved. So moved.
And I'll take a second.
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 Okay, because of the size of the project, I'd like to allow for any additional discussion prior to moving to a vote. Is there any discussion around this project? I think, Cedric, thank you for the presentation. This is a very significant project for the authority, and I think the timing could be construed as suboptimal given the pandemic. Just we had a rough year, but it's also, I think we're going to be in a good position for the future when we come onto the other side. We're going to come out of it kind of right at the same time that hopefully the industry returns to some of its strength. It's been a long time coming to this point. I'm hugely appreciative of the work that everybody's put in on this. And I'm just looking forward to walking through that terminal connector soon. Okay. With no additional discussion, I would then ask for a vote. All in favor of awarding the bids as presented, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Okay, you are good to go, my friends. We'll award the bids as presented and await future action from the other parties involved. I don't think, last thing I do is I'm going to, so we do have a vacancy on our executive committee because of the departure of Ted Rosenberger from the board. I'm going to then ask the nominating committee to come together in this month and present a candidate to the board in our next meeting. So the nominating committee will come together and select a Lehigh County representative to the executive committee to round out Ted's term on that committee. I'm also going to, because of the size of this project and its ability to draw oxygen out of the room with our other committees, I'm going to form an ad hoc terminal connector committee to deal with all terminal connector business going forward. The committee will meet on the same day as the rest of our committees, and I will select members of that committee over the course of the next month, but we'll prepare to have our first meeting on the Thursday for committee meetings. So if you are interested in serving on that committee, please let me know. Without any other business, I would go ahead then and ask for a motion to adjourn this meeting.